Welcome to the IoT Unicorn Podcast. This is Pete Bernard from Microsoft, and this podcast is for anyone interested in the long-term technology trends in the IoT space and the journey from here to there. So let's get started. On this episode of the IoT Unicorn, we're chatting with Rob Tiffany, the VP and Head of IoT Strategy at Ericsson. And we're going to talk about submarines, laser discs. We'll talk about remote everything, a little bit about Windows Phone, Zune, and Kin, and then really dig into how do we better simplify Telco plus IoT and some insights about the pandemic. So please join us. Great. So, Rob, thanks for joining us today on the Unicorn, and really appreciate taking the time. I was going to start by asking you a couple of things about, what your role is currently at Ericsson, kind of how you got there. I know that you and I did work together at Microsoft years ago, back in the Windows Mobile days. Good times. Good times.
Those were good times. Yep, absolutely.
Yes, I think you were, let's see, when did you stop working for Windows Mobile? It was like 2008 or something, or is that?
Yeah. And certainly by 2010 or around that time frame, I took an architect role in another group, and probably started spending more time on Azure.
Yes.
I was at Microsoft for 12 years, and so the first half was mobile, Windows Mobile,
right.
CE,
right.
Windows Phone. Second half was Azure IoT. And you know what? We had some good times in the Windows Mobile days when it was just us and BlackBerry slugging it out.
Mm-hmm.
Those we were making when things like Exchange Active Sync was a big deal to people.
That's right. That was the big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then no doubt, when we rebooted and did Windows Phone 7 and 7.5 and all that, I used to do so many EBCs for mobility, and you noticed the difference, and you had to get really thick skin.
Yes, I know. Well, I peeled off after 6. I think I went on to Zune incubation. I did Kin. I did all kinds of weird phone things. And went off into the wilderness for a while on that, while everyone else finished up with Windows Phone. But
oh my God!
I also noticed on your LinkedIn profile, so you went to SUNY Albany. Are you from that area originally, or?
You know what? I finished college on board a submarine. So when I was in the Navy driving subs, I had maybe 30 or so hours to go to graduate. And so I've actually never set foot on the SUNY Albany campus.
Oh, wild.
But the military has programs with lots of different universities around the country. And, to show how old I really am, I was able to take college courses underway on the submarine using Pioneer laser discs.
Wow.
For college instruction, if anybody remembers what that was.
Yeah, that is old school. That's old school.
That is totally old school.
I was actually just dropped my daughter off at Bard, which is a little south of Albany. So I was just there like a week ago. So that's why I saw that on your profile, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a cool area. The Adirondacks, the whole upstate New York thing.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah, I just dropped my daughter off at Arizona State last week.
It
was a little warm down there.
Yeah, I could imagine.
To say the least. But you know what? I think everything started back then with submarines and teaching myself how to code and do databases. Right. And when you think about IoT, you're just kind of remoting information that you had on these local sensors. And we were surrounded by sensors on the submarine. There's the obvious things like sonar and things like that, and kind of this higher frequency one to see what your depth is below the keel. But inside you had CO2, radiation, all kinds of gas sensors and things like that to make sure we're still alive.
Right.
which was kind of a thing.
Yeah, kind of important.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
that's interesting. And so you did the Microsoft thing, and so you joined Ericsson a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah. I did the Microsoft thing. I was recruited out of the Azure, back when we were doing incubating Azure IT. There was that time. Actually, Microsoft's IoT stuff started in the embedded team with Intelligent System Service. And then I went to Hitachi actually to build an industrial IoT platform called Lumada, which was really interesting. But yes, I joined Ericsson a couple of years ago. And up until recently, I split my time between Seattle and Stockholm. Normally, I'd be in Kista at Ericsson headquarters with the rest of my team. So yes, certainly disconnected these days.
Yeah.
And what Ericsson is doing in IoT is very different than my background, both at Microsoft and at Hitachi for sure, which was more data focused outcomes analytics.
Right.
Ericsson manages we have an IoT team. We have like 3 products. Our big one is this IoT Accelerator, which is basically a global connection management platform. If you know what Jasper is, it's kind of like that in some ways. It kind of spans like about 35 or so mobile operators around the world and lots of enterprises. But the key thing, how we're always talking about that initial bootstrapping of devices to get them connected, right? In the event that you're using cellular for IoT, one of your options would be this IoT Accelerator thing we have at Ericsson. And so, the narrative would be if a machine is being manufactured in Shenzhen and at manufacture time, they're putting in the microcontroller and the software and the security keys and all that stuff. Right. And there's also a cellular module. And if they're using our technology, then when a customer buys that product and they turn it on the first time somewhere else in the world, maybe France, then it wakes up and connects to a local mobile operator to start seeing telemetry.
I see. So it's like a bootstrap profile kind of thing that phones home, and then you guys sort of connect it up to the right telco network.
Yeah, and then it roams as well. But it's different than anybody who, like, at least when IoT was getting hyped. I was doing IoT M2M in the 90s, but when it really started getting hyped after 2010, 2012, whatever, you started seeing these global SIMs and things like that are just roaming all the time.
Yes.
But what the average person doesn't realize is mobile operators don't always want you roaming and just camped out on their network if you're from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so our technology, aside from the technology itself, and we're operating our own network. So even though Ericsson creates the technologies that mobile operators use, we actually manage our own network that spans the globe, that interfaces with all these other mobile operators. And then there's lots of contracts and everything. But the takeaway to make sure that it's all okay with them, that these devices, and we're also in the connected car space, and we've been doing that for a long time. And so you can imagine a car manufactured in Japan and sold in Europe, and the whole infotainment. And then as we move forward, more and more IoT telemetry coming off, those cars may want to roam from country to country.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of stuff with those guys too.
I noticed that recently I got an email this morning from a account team in Finland talking about a telco. There seems to be this confluence of telco and IoT, sort of like, and I've seen, and I think you might have had some commentary on that too, or pointed some articles about sort of like 5G plus AI plus IoT, or there's something about we're seeing some telcos that really like forward leaning telcos really investing and thinking about IoT as sort of the next big sort of wave for them. I mean, Ericsson is sort of part of that story too. I mean, is there some unnatural attraction between IoT and telco, or what's going on there? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I am. But of course, if you remember, we saw this before when the IoT craze started taking off. You might remember a lot of the telcos built their own IoT platforms.
Yes.
And waited for people to come.
That's right.
And people didn't always show up. And so, but and it seems like most of the mobile operators actually took a stab at it back then.
Yeah.
Of course, if we go back further in time, most mobile operators thought that it was their right to be the cloud as well. And they gave a shot at that, but it didn't work out either. But you're right. There's a renewed effort. I think a lot of it's just numbers and money. We've saturated smartphones and people, and so we need, and lots of mobile operators, for better or worse, think of the world in SIMs and connected SIM endpoints. That's how they see the world. And so it's like, okay, we've maxed out all the SIMs on people. Where are we going to get some more SIMs? And so they're thinking, oh, it's IoT, right? And so that's where a lot of it's coming. We've certainly seen some of them turning on some like NB-IoT and Catem-1, LTE-M networks to try to take a stab at that. And so that's kind of cruising along.
I noticed that and I love to buy all the gadgets and stuff. And I'm also very invested in the whole LPWA space. I'm a big believer in that. And I'm curious, and I see some things happening there, but it just seems like such a no-brainer for some of these Wi-Fi connected things. Like I just installed a garage door opener in my house. I have a separate garage, and it's Wi-Fi connected for some reason. But I have to stand on a step ladder and scan a QR code and hold it next to it. I mean, I'm like, why doesn't it just turn on and connect through like a low power cellular? Just, such a no-brainer. But it hasn't quite yet turned on.
No, you're right. Are you connected much with the SimTech guys doing LoRa?
SimTech, not that much. No.
Okay. Yeah. It seems, it's funny. So much of this is people you work with over the years. When I went to Hitachi to build this industrial thing, I had a couple of compadres from Microsoft come along as well. But needless to say, a couple of those guys are actually working for SimTech now and pushing hard on the whole LoRaWAN thing.
I see.
And it looks like they're getting traction, actually.
Is LoRaWAN, is that unlicensed or is that licensed? I think that's unlicensed.
It's unlicensed, yeah.
There's always those two camps, right? There's the licensed, which you get all your telcos with their spectrum and their 3GPP stuff. And then the unlicensed, which is probably a lot faster on the innovation side. But
yes, they can get to market faster. Like you may remember, gosh, how many years ago was it when we're at Mobile World Congress and Sigfox launched out of nowhere, and they raised a bunch of money, but they weren't going to do what the LoRaWAN guys did. They tried to be their own mobile operator as well. And so it's been interesting watching that. And you're right, they can get to market faster. They were using sub 1 gigahertz and some EU rules about how often you could send a signal and how big it could be. And they're like, hey, I think we can thread the needle here.
Yes. I think I'm looking forward to the LPWA stuff becoming more mainstream and just kind of turnkey, if you will. It just seems like it's such a low hanging fruit. I mean, there's the obvious metering and telemetry, and that's parking meters and gas meters, but even a lot of this kind of current Wi-Fi connected gear that people buy is it's just painful to sort of get it all. I just installed a JuiceBox level 2 charger for my house. Okay. And again, I had to download the app, and the app, I had connected the JuiceBox to my phone and my phone to my Wi-Fi and the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what is happening?
Absolutely.
So,
you know what? It's so important, or at least from my perspective, to put yourself in the shoes of a developer and what they have to go through to get something connected. And I always think of the hassle factor. Like if I talk to people in the telco world and say, why is it cellular IoT is so far behind Wi-Fi or other ways to connect?
Right.
And a big reason is actually what you just described. It's such a hassle and it's expensive. Right. Developers like, oh, I got to get some kind of SIM-based module thing, and I got to. Do I need to call a mobile operator?
Right.
And get a plan, and then And you know what? The mobile operators, they still need to work on getting their prices down lower where it's an appropriate amount for a IoT endpoint. Because, in many cases, the prices are still too high.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like my garage door opener, I mean, how much data is that sending? It's like either the garage door is open or closed. It's like 1 bit,
Right.
Plus like 500K of overhead,
Yeah.
Exactly. A 1 or a 0, open or closed.
1 or a 0. Yeah. And so I think for telcos to be successful, while they would probably love to charge smartphone prices for plans for things, the reality is no one's going to use it unless they can still have an ROI. If I'm doing agriculture and I'm trying to put like a weather station in a orchard,
right,
and my plan with a mobile operator is costing me $30 a month.
Yeah, there's no way.
I'm never going to make any money on that deal. It's not worth doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's the simplicity factor. The economics obviously drive the big deployments. But yeah, hopefully we'll start to see that take hold a little bit. I wanted to actually ask you a question about, I saw a post of yours the other day talking about 5G. And, I'm sure you and I both get emails and questions about 5G on a daily basis or hourly basis. But you said it's not just another G, which I thought was a good way of describing the other aspects of 5G. When people think of 5G, like I just got this Samsung Note Ultra 20 thing. Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. How do you like it? Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it's just like, it's hard to describe how awesome it is. And it's got 5G in it. And so fantastic, right? Classic use case. And I know I work with Qualcomm all the time and Cristiano Amon and all these folks, and they're all like 5G all the way. But it's sort of almost like the rest of 5G doesn't quite get the airtime, about the high density and low latency. I mean, how do you see that, impacting like the IoT space?
Yeah. Well, if the IoT space had actually been successful, because we've massively underperformed across the board, it doesn't matter what company you are, what technology you built, everyone's massively underperformed. And so, but let's just assume for a second that we've been successful and we weren't in the trough of disillusionment right now.
Right.
We would have found that we would have hit bottlenecks with lots of concurrently connected devices. If we were using cellular just over normal 4G networks and things like that.
Right.
But we didn't hit those bottlenecks because IoT deployments haven't been that big yet. And so the great thing about 5G is just with that same hardware, that same gear, all of a sudden you're getting more capacity. And you're right. That's what I wrote about. No one ever talks about the capacity angle. They talk about speed,
right?
And they talk about the really low latency, and all that's super important.
Sure.
But for IoT, capacity is going to be the most important. And so the fact that it's 100 times more capacity for the same cell tower, the same gear, is miraculous. And so that and then that supporting 1 million devices per square kilometer that's how we're actually going to have connected cars working well, smart cities, all those urban, a lot of those things that require a lot of density and a lot of devices all talking together over cellular networks. That's going to make that real and make it happen.
Yeah, I hear you. And you're right. We haven't really hit the bottlenecks yet, so we're not quite appreciative of it. But when you kind of think through, how many billions of devices will be connected over the next few years, you just have to go there, and you have to have that infrastructure. And then the ultra low latency stuff, I think, is fascinating. I mean, from the Microsoft side, we do a lot of commercial stuff, manufacturing, healthcare, a lot of things like that. And the ultra low latency and some of those aspects of 5G are pretty fascinating, I think, and start to get more, in industry 4.0 type of scenarios.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I was curious what you think about my next question around 5G and release 16 for 3GPP. Like, do we need 3GPP release 16 to really make this 5G thing work for IoT? I mean, it's or do we need 17? I mean, do you have any opinion on that, or is that too esoteric of a question?
It's a little esoteric. And the only reason I say that is I remember talking to folks in the past who would say ridiculous things to me like, oh, now that we're going to get 5G, we can finally do IoT. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, we've done IoT forever, and we've done it a million different ways, and we certainly did it over GPRS, and it was fine. And so I don't need 5G to do IoT. Is it going to make it better, and is it going to help us with this capacity? Absolutely. And you're right. These subsequent releases, getting that ultra reliable, that low latency, you know, for mission critical stuff, like. Because as you can imagine, you're talking about Microsoft being in the industrial world. Ericsson makes private LTE and private 5G technologies. Yeah. And so that, you know, that's complementary to what you're doing at Microsoft, because we are certainly getting pinged on a lot by a lot of giant manufacturers around the world who, as they're heading into Industry 4.0, they look at some of those use cases that require mass customization, flexibility around the factory. Sure. The notion of a fixed assembly line that doesn't change is gonna go away.
That's Henry Ford style stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore they won't be able to use Ethernet anymore because it's going to move around. So they need wireless. They haven't had a lot of success with Wi-Fi. Right. And so there are lots of people are piloting private 5G, private LTE inside factories, distribution centers. And so that's really interesting space there.
Yeah, we've seen that as well. And we also see interest from like transportation hubs, you know, ports, shipping ports, airports, you know, places that have just a lot of acreage, right? I mean, Absolutely. So you're talking about like, you know, oil refineries. I mean, places where there's like 100 acres of space and they need a homogeneous kind of high-speed network. You're not going to stick like Wi-Fi repeaters out on poles down the runway. Right. So I think that's another big area. I mean, we talked about the LPWA side is cool with the parking meters and garage door openers. And the other side, you've talked about there is going to be this kind of big wave of transformation going on. With some of these big, you know, industrial players, I think using 5G or some kind of cell technology, private cell there.
And it's amazing because I've seen it in action and the coverage is insane. The distance, the speed within a large building, instead of having zillions of Wi-Fi access points trying to create coverage, you just have a few of these radio dots that we make that and it just roams and it just works seamlessly all over. That's going to be fun to watch.
That'll be fun to watch. Yes. Hey, I was going to ask you kind of change gears a little bit. So we're recording this on August 25th. So we've been in this pandemic mode for quite a while. What kind of insights have you gained from this pandemic?
Yes. You know what? I think I put it together because I have thought about it. I've kind of taken down notes, you know, what's worked, what's not worked. And so I would say succinctly, digital experiences delivered over connectivity is making remote things local. And so whether it's you and I chatting here, the rest of the world on Zoom, like you're seeing, you know, it's kept people together. My wife is a school teacher, and so she had to start teaching remotely. And so, and her school district uses Teams because I'm right by Redmond, of course. So I'm an Office 365 school district. Yeah, you know, as opposed to a Google Classroom school district, right? Sure. And so a lot of, you know, and you've seen it in the stock price of certain tech companies. It's like, wow, we're really using this. But it certainly plays back to IoT and the taking an experience where I would normally be local in person and making it remote. And I know it sounds really simple to say that. Sure. But the hero in all this is the internet. Right. It's held together. Yes. You know, it keeps reaffirming that it's maybe one of the greatest creations ever. And it's holding together for the whole planet, which is just miraculous. Yeah. It's
you know, the idea of remote everything, you know, it sounds simple, but it's so complicated. And you know, we talk about latency and bandwidth and other things, and just I think it's been a lifeline for so many people, to be honest with you, just with the video conferencing. I mean, Satya talks about the acceleration, like 2 years worth of acceleration in 2 months, basically, just because people have to, start collaborating, with these tools like Teams and Zoom and everything else. And so we've all sort of fast forwarded a couple of years in our adoption of some of these technologies. Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see what sticks, as we get out of this pandemic at some point. Which of these habits will sort of stick, that we'll get more used to. And then, obviously, I think maybe also for me, I also now probably have more appreciation of the in-person experiences than I probably did. And I did travel recently, with my daughter to get her to school. And, I actually enjoy traveling. I enjoy being on an airplane. And, these days it's a pretty high anxiety kind of thing with lots of face shields and wipes and things. But getting back to that mode, that's something that I'll probably for the rest of my life really appreciate, being able to just sort of freely travel. Because of this kind of situation we're in. So it'll be interesting to see. I agree with you, though. I think the internet has held together, and that has been the hero amongst many heroes. But this internet infrastructure, fiber, electricity beneath the cities and the country, and then little things popping up, either cell towers or Wi-Fi access points that let us roam around mobility and keeping us together. Obviously, we see a lot of stuff. There's been trends and things that we've had before that just super accelerated, like you said, like telemedicine, remote healthcare. Just skyrocketed, right? Well, I know there was I know there was a lot of rules in place for practitioners not being able to work across state lines. A lot of those rules were suspended during the pandemic to enable people to do telemedicine, which I thought was fantastic. They were pretty, from a layman's perspective, they seemed anachronistic that you couldn't, Zoom conference with a patient in another state and actually provide support or guidance. And so, things like that, where we just sort of moved the whole ball forward, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. No, it's all good. I think we learned a lot, and I do miss traveling too. I complained about it when I'm flying every few weeks to Sweden or wherever. Sure. But then that abrupt end of it, and just the silence and being at home. It's weird. When you travel a lot and you're accustomed to all these international airports and maybe the place you go to get coffee or this broad world for a handful of us, it's like our comfort zone. And then it just ended, and I miss it. No doubt about it.
Cool. So, Rob, thanks a lot for the time. Appreciate it. And good to see you again. And,
absolutely.
I see you pop on about LinkedIn on kind of almost like a daily basis. So we'll keep communicating through LinkedIn and stuff.
We're teachers.
Yes, exactly.
Spreading the word. Absolutely.
Exactly. Sounds good. All right, Rob, well, take care. Stay safe.
You do the same. It's great talking to you.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
This is Pete Bernard. You've been listening to the IoT Unicorn Podcast, and thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode, and feel free to give us some feedback at the IoT Unicorn at Microsoft.com. Thank you.